Hello, welcome to the Be Well Now Method podcast. I am here today with Darlene Marshall. Darlene is a wellness coach and a well-being expert who got her start in fitness in 2011. She's helped hundreds of clients and thousands of students build authenticity, fulfillment, and a well-being lifestyle. In 2021, Burn Along named Darlene America's favorite trainer. And earlier this year, she was named one of the top 24 coaches having an impact in 2024 by Coaching 360 News. Darlene has a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and is an adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern University. She is a regular contributor to the certification courses with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. You can find Darlene on Instagram at darlene.coach and her podcast, Better Than Fine, on NASM's podcast network just won the 2024 Mark Harm Award for Educational Episode. And I can see why, because I enjoyed thoroughly being on Darlene's podcast, and I am so happy to have her here today. So welcome, Darlene. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time when you were on the show, and so I'm so excited to get to spend some more time with you.
Awesome. Great. So I'd like to start with a little meditation to make sure that you and I and our listeners start in the well state. So if you'd like to, just close your eyes or just look down on something and let your exhale just settle your attention from your brain into your body and let your body be held by the earth. And notice that your breath is coming and going and there's nothing that you have to do right now. Just feel your breath moving in and out. Noticing that your body is taking care of you right now without having to try. And as you feel your breath moving in and out, let it bring you to your center where you know things beyond what you know in your head. And just notice what's here now. What's important to you right now about your well-being. And notice how you know this in your center beyond words. And then let that awareness expand from your center into your body, noticing if there's anywhere in your body that would like to move right now. Maybe holding a little ready to move tension. That might be a big stretch, or it might be just a gentle massage, trusting your body to take care of you. And then when you're ready on an exhale, let your body come back to stillness. Keep that attention on your whole person. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes if they're closed. So I am curious, what is bringing you joy right now?
What is bringing me joy? Well, we're recording this. I'm not sure what your production schedule looks like, but we're recording this in the holidays, the mid-December. Yeah. And at the end of this week, we have the solstice. And I am a big fan of marking these great, solar system level events. And so every year for the solstice, I have a Yule party where we'll have a fire, right? It's the longest night of the year. And I believe that so many of the esoteric traditions that come out of the global north are really celebrations of the way that light gets us through the darkness, right? They're demarcations of hope and peace and warmth and connection, because for our evolutionary ancestors, of course, this was the most dangerous time of the year, the cold and the dark. And here in North America, our indigenous tradition had a figure known as the Wendigo, which is, of course, the cannibalizing spirit of selfishness. And so to me, Yule is this ritual of the way in which connection can get us through the darkest times. And so my family will be coming, my closest local friends will be coming. We've got some rituals that I do every Yule, but we'll also be doing vision boards together. It's the first time I've shared vision boards with my family. And so I'm really excited. My mom is making a pot roast. My friends are making appetizers. Everyone in my life knows I hate to cook, so they're all doing the cooking. I'm doing the hosting. I'm going to build the fire. So that's, I think, what I'm most looking forward to right now is the joy of planning this event, but also getting to share some of my deeper beliefs in ritual with people in my life who haven't been in that space before with me, and seeing where that takes us. So it's going to be fun and fascinating and beautiful.
Wow. There's so much there. I just learned so much.
Whoa, Janet!
Whoa. We just start out strong.
You said show up. I showed
up. There's so much there. It's so funny because this morning I was thinking about all the things that we're celebrating this month and, in the world, and they all connect to light. And so what you said about light and how this is, and it connects to what I really want to dig in with you about, which is this idea about positivity and positive psychology and well-being. And how do we marry this without ending up in this kind of fake sense of toxic positivity and making well-being about everything being well? And I love that that ritual digs into the hardest part of the year and what was hardest for people, and the way that the courage that you're bringing to that, to share that with the people you care about most, takes a lot of courage too.
Yeah, I think real authentic connection requires vulnerability. And for the people that love us most to truly love us, they must know us. And I have no choice but to lean in if I want those people to be close. I moved home after being gone for 20 years. I moved home during lockdown, bought a house in my hometown, which I never, ever expected to do. And I had lived a life that is very different from the people that I see day to day now. And part of this journey of the last couple of years in my post-COVID era has been rebuilding a deeper day-to-day connection with people who I really only saw at holidays, weddings, and funerals, and now choosing to build something different with them. So it's been exciting, but it also does require the leap, right? And some really good boundaries.
Yeah, right. So what allows you to do that? What are the elements there that are key for, I can imagine someone listening to that and being like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah.
What are the elements?
Yeah, I think, it starts with laying groundwork in relationships. I've been very fortunate. I come from a rural, relatively like mainstream American conservative background, and, grew up with some very different ideas than the people that I was being raised by, hence leaving for 20 years. But in that 20-year span, I also had the opportunities to have real boundary setting and growth conversations with my family of origin, and choosing to share with them opportunities for repair, and also strongly recommending they get some therapy themselves. And so when the opportunity presented itself, even in the end of 2019, the conversation started about, well, maybe I would move home. Maybe it's time for this next phase of my life. And I had gone through a divorce in 2018.
Okay.
I wasn't really sure what the next chapter of my life looked like. I was in grad school. And then lockdown came, and suddenly I had the circumstances to really slow down and look at my own life and the direction it was taking and the things I wanted and the people who were in it, and some real important conversations with my closest family about their own mortality and their own choices and the things that they wanted. So I think to answer your question about the elements, it requires an incredible amount of communication. Again, a willingness to be vulnerable. But along the way, also, I feel very strongly that the way that we structure our lives in our modern society, and I'm not the only person who feels this probably won't be totally left field to your listeners. But our social infrastructure is not in alignment with what we know is best for human beings. And if we want something different, that means choosing something different. It means choosing to have intergenerational households, choosing to have intergenerational community, taking the leap to interact with people who maybe don't fully perfectly align with the Venn diagram of our beliefs.
Yeah.
But the research shows us that when we do those things, we actually are better for it.
Yeah.
And the more siloed and isolated we become, the less robust our well-being and resilience are. So I'm very fortunate. My family members are mostly growth oriented and mostly introspective and have been willing to have hard conversations. So I'm not saying that it's just a magic wand, because again, if our theme is toxic positivity, I don't want to sound like, oh no, just like it's not all sunshine and unicorn farts, but it is worth the effort of something more, right? To do the hard work to build something deeper.
Yeah. This hard work.
Yeah. Hard work is definitely one of the ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be hard. And it's, how do we marry that with well-being, being well? And, those 4 little letters of being well can be so filled with misinformation and misunderstanding. And what I'm hearing is that I love hearing how the pandemic provided opportunities that may not have presented itself, and how it turned into something that changed the course of life that was really something that really needed to happen anyway, for the people who listened. And so it really required you to be very connected to yourself and what mattered to you, and be very clear about that.
Yeah, I think you hit on something important there when we're talking about building well-being in an authentic way. To me, that journey starts with what you just said, getting in tune with oneself. And that's part of why I so appreciate your model of like exercising well, and the double meaning there, right? That yes, movement is an essential component of that. But also that we talk about wellness like it's these things that we consume, right? Products and services. By definition, wellness is a process, an ongoing process that is as long as our life journey is. And then depending on your belief system, perhaps longer than that. And well-being is a state. It is an outcome.
Yes.
And that outcome is not guaranteed, right? And in that framing, wellness is a practice. And I think that practice starts with the attunement, the awareness of oneself, the ability to do exactly what you did in the meditation that started, which is such a lovely way to start. Thank you for that.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
But the ability to drop in to attunement with ourselves, to listen to what is the feedback that my nervous system, my emotional intelligence, my mind, and my deeper consciousness are giving me about my experience. And do I know how to first find that alignment, listen to that wisdom, and then interpret it into meaningful action in my life? And that's not always going to be fun. But that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't lead us to something that, I believe very strongly that each of us is here. I call, Ram Dass called it Earth School. And I have very much co-opted the language of like, I'm here to do the curriculum of Earth School. But in order for me to know my curriculum, I got to know what I'm about, and then do the best I can with whatever hand I'm playing at the moment in that process of wellness, of life, of existence. And for me, that journey is one toward deeper and broader states of well-being and impact, and well-being and impact.
It's layers, right? It's like layers. And that core layer is this ability to connect with not just what we know in our head, but what we know in our body. I love how you define that as wellness as a process, that it's a process. I love that, because we hear, wellness products that are anything from dog food to, skincare, and eye exams. And we use that word.
That's my favorite one.
Right.
The wellness eye exam.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right. I know. And it's a process. And that process, I like how you said that, is being able to tap into, you kind of said 3 things there: being able to listen and tap into what you know inside, and really listen and honor it. And then being willing to align what we do with that. Did I miss anything there? There was so much.
I think we got it.
I think I need to take notes.
It's like undergrad right here.
Yes. I'm in Darlene school. I love it. It's true, but this is like
Darlene class at Earth School.
Darlene class at Earth School. Yeah. Well, it's that, then you have something to give because you learn from yourself. And I always, I love the saying, we teach what we need to learn. And what as I'm writing my book, anything I'm doing, it's coming from my life lessons. It's coming from, oh, that argument that I had with someone I care about. Oh, what did I learn from that? Or, that broken ankle or whatever it is, it's life lessons. And that's how we show up authentic, right?
Yeah. Doing the curriculum.
Doing the curriculum. Yeah. So help me with this positivity, this positive psychology piece, and maybe start with what positive psychology is, and then we can talk about what it's not and how people can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you understand positive psychology, let's try that tongue try one more time. To understand positive psychology, it is helpful to understand the origins of psychology in general. Right? So traditional psychology in the 20th century was largely focused on studying what's wrong with people. And that's because psychology is a pretty young science compared to things like chemistry or physics or mathematics. And the desire to be taken seriously in this like Western scientific model applied to the mind meant studying anger and rage and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and anxiety and depression. And the idea there was that if we could solve those problems, we could better humanity through studying the mind. And that is a noble pursuit that I do not wish to knock. However, generally it was the idea that studying happiness, studying joy was frivolity, right? It wasn't serious science. Fortunately, Martin Seligman, who's considered to be the founder of positive psychology, when he was in his graduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania, he discovered the concept of learned helplessness, which essentially is that any animal, including the human animal, put into an unsolvable problem, whether that's a physical problem or an intellectual puzzle, if that problem is unsolvable, they will eventually give up. Now, that might be subjectively perceived as unsolvable, or objectively there is not a solution to the puzzle. Not everyone gives up. Not all animals, not all humans. The humans that do give up cannot be induced to try again because they essentially will say, well, why bother? Those adults that are, or humans, I should just experiencing helplessness, will also mirror a depressive state. Most of the criteria for clinical depression is mirrored in a state of helplessness, of passivity. But then there's these people who don't end up helpless. And Seligman, in his insight, said, okay, well, why don't we look at those people? Like, yes, the helplessness thing is interesting and we should study that too. This is very important to understanding like depression and passivity and languishing, but also what's up with that group of people that's doing really well? Even when they get the unsolvable puzzles, we can still get them to try again. And when we give them the solvable puzzles, they then solve them. And eventually those became the factors of resilience, like what makes us resilient to challenge. But what it unearthed was explanatory styles, optimism, an entire field about what's right with people. And that became the field of positive psychology, which is the scientific study of human well-being and flourishing. What are the things that make life worth living? And how do we build them into people of all different walks of life? And I am not someone who came into positive psychology because I had this like gifted, wonderful life. I grew up rural poor. I grew up in adversity. If anybody knows what the ACEs scores are, the adverse childhood experiences, I have almost a perfect ACEs score, which is not something you want to be able to brag about.
Exactly.
And I share that because, I think that there is an assumption that if you are a well-being expert, that means that you walk around all day with like glitter in your eyes. And that is not the case. I am a person who has lived through a variety of traumas and adverse experiences, some of those intergenerational, and come out the other side with a toolkit of active practice. I had a client today call it the whole kitchen sink approach of like, okay, I know that this is the dark, cold time of the year, so we're doing all of it every day. As a resilience strategy. And when we talk about something like toxic positivity, when we talk about something like the positivity of equivalent of a spiritual bypass, that is dissociation, right? That is not integration. That is not authenticity.
Yeah.
That is using tools of like positive thinking to dissociate from our reality, which is not the assignment. Is not what we're trying to promote. So the field of positive psychology is the study of those things. And also, as an applied positive psychology practitioner, it's how do I get these tools into people's heads and hearts and mouths and minds so they can live a life worth living, whatever that means to them, and live out their personal mission, whatever their curriculum is here at school.
Okay. I'm not even going to try and unpack that. That was so well said. It was so it was just so well said. And I love your way of describing this positive psychology that tells us there's so much more here and that there is hope. And I think that's when we understand, that's why I love exercise science, because when we understand how the body works, it makes sense, and there's so much to celebrate. There's so much positive there. And there's so much evidence that we are designed to thrive. It's incredible. And same thing with the brain. And with psychology, that there's so much evidence that we're designed to thrive. So I'm so thankful that the field of positive psychology, was started, and that you were in it and bringing it out there in a very realistic way, because, applied positive psychology is very different than kind of studying it on research papers. It's all right. How do we live it? That's hard. That's the challenge.
Yeah, and I have to applaud not just Martin Seligman, but the cadre of practitioners who really were the founders of the field in the 90s. When UPenn approached Seligman about having the first master's degree in positive psychology, he was quite adamant it had to be an applied program.
Okay.
Most of the people doing research, I don't know, I was going to say most of the people in research probably are PhD candidates or holders. I'm not certain that is true right now. There's certainly a few of us out here doing research with masters. But the intention always is that you are a scholar practitioner. Because you have to do it for it to work, whether we're talking about reps in the gym, carrots on my plate, or meditation or gratitude practice, right? I think this is actually a perfect example of this, and a sticking point in my own practice and mind. All of us now hear gratitude all the time, right? It's so ubiquitous to talk about gratitude, gratitude. Well, personally, I spent the first decade that I tried to practice gratitude with it backfiring. I would make my morning list, because the gratitude journal I was doing said I had to make a list of 3 things, and I would feel worse. And it took, like I said, a decade. And it wasn't until I was actually studying positive psychology that I finally understood why the lightning bolt moment happened in a bodega in the West Village, that I realized that for me, I was making a list of things that I should feel thankful for, right? It was a list of obligations,
right? As
opposed to feeling the emotive experience of appreciation, authentic, genuine. There's something outside of myself that is beneficial to me that I did not do, which is the technical definition of gratitude. And the emotive experience that would come up. And it's because I had miscoded that word as part of my upbringing as a feeling of being obligated to something, as opposed to feeling gratitude. And the aha clicked in me, right? You have to do it. You have to practice the experience instead of it being an intellectual exercise in order to have something different happen in your neurophysiology, in your cognition, in all of your integrated being. And so when we talk about something like toxic positivity, often I find it is a misinterpretation of these ideas meant to just wash over the complexity and nuance that is a human experience.
Thank you for that and that example, because I always feel that when I'm writing about gratitude around Thanksgiving, I always want to capture that difference, and it is that whole person experience. And I think that that's what I find is missing. That's why I feel so strongly about this whole person approach, because we can exercise right with our brain. We can eat right with our brain. We can meditate with our brain. But if we're not experiencing in our body, then we're not doing it. We're not well. We're not getting what we're supposed to get from it and what we intended to get from it. And more importantly, we're missing that whole piece of connecting to what we know inside, which is at the heart of this whole process of well-being and wellness. Yeah. So
Yeah.
feeling our body, like feeling in our body.
Yeah. Last week's episode, and I've been reading a lot about interoception lately. Are you
Yes.
familiar with
Yeah,
that?
I am. I just read about it. Yes.
Yeah. So for listeners who don't know the word, interoception is now being recognized as a seventh sense. So everybody knows there are five senses. The sixth sense being proprioception, it's kind of like the GPS of yourself. Like I'm waving my hands around without smacking the microphone, even though I'm not looking at my fingertips, because I know intuitively where the mic is. And then interoception is our internal perception of the sensations in our body and the information that it's given us. And, for most of positive psych, because it's a psychology, it was mostly founded by what one of my friends lovingly refers to as lollipop people, right? All brain, everything's above the collarbone.
Right.
And kind of this third wave of positive psychology. And recently I asked Seligman, hey, do you think that psychology is actually encompassing of well-being? And he's like, and I was so ready to make the argument with him about positive psychology is not complete science of well-being. And I had all these arguments ready. And he goes, no, it's not. I was like, oh, you think, okay, well, what would you call it? He goes, well-being science. I was like, oh, okay, Marty. Okay, Dr. Seligman. So he's on board.
Yeah.
Even as one of these very mind-based people, this understanding that our interoception, our vitality, our connection and integration in a more complete self is the most informative of a true well-being state. And I think you're really onto something about the way in which we can go through all the checklist items, right? I can eat all the vegetables and I can write the journal, but if we're not in a feeling state that is informative, and I encounter this, I'm sure you encounter this with clients all the time. They will come to me and say, I have been working with a nutritionist. I've been working with the trainer. I have been on all the apps. I've got 15 wearables. I've got this, I've got that. I've tried, and I still don't feel good, or I still am struggling, or I'm still ... because all of it was external. All of it was like a digital shell of experience without any of it being deep, right? It was an exoskeleton of action instead of an integrative experience, and getting them to, instead of to open up, to go in and find out what wisdom was there. And it's a game changer.
Exactly. I see people at the end of the line. I always think about that, having weight loss surgery is kind of the end of the line. You've been through a lot of stuff when you're doing that. And the clinical work that I do is with weight loss patients, and either having medication or surgery. And I stay in that field because I want to add that whole person approach. And I find that they have been missing that. And that is what's missing. It's not that they don't know what to do. It's not even that they're not motivated. They're so motivated. But they're motivated by externals, and they've only been taught to do that. And they haven't been reintroduced to their body. Instead, they're told your body will be okay when you get to this weight, and everything else is your fault. The reason you got here is your fault. So how do you even make peace with your body when it's working against you and you feel like your brain's working against you? And I feel like they're in this constant war with themselves. Their brain's working against them, their body's working against them. And my job is to meld them together through movement, through moving in the way that our body's designed, through moving in the way that feels good for them now, and to listen to it and honor it and not push through pain and all of that. And I find it so healing, and it's very little words. It's very much about experience. And you can see the difference on their face and their whole person when they get it. It's amazing to me. And so as you're talking about that, it brings me to that moment when I see someone's face shifting. I can see it. and they got themselves back, and I know,
or they're meeting themselves for the first time.
Right. Yeah. Right. Even for the first time. Right. Maybe since they were an infant, it might have been the last time that they were okay in their body. And then as soon as they gained some weight as a child and were told they were too fat and were put on a diet or told that they had to exercise as a child, they lost themselves. And it makes me so sad,
Even depending on whose models we're looking at in terms of, if your nervous system is formed in utero and you are born to a mother who is experiencing stress or living in a stress state outside of the well state while you are in utero, right? So now we're talking about intergenerational experience of disembodiment, and we could run all the way down that rabbit hole, but I just appreciate you doing that work. I've had a few clients who fit the profile you're describing too. And so often the way in which their efforts are based in, I call it the 3 horsemen of the change apocalypse, shame, blame, and guilt.
Right.
If we look at the most well-researched models of motivation and consistency and longevity in effort to take care of oneself, when we are motivated by shame, blame, and guilt, whether it's externalized or even worse, internalized, they're the closest thing to not being motivated at all. And that shell of obligation to action, as opposed to being told your being is not wrong. You are not inherently flawed. And there are things that will feel good if you are first taught to feel, and feeling is made to be safe for you. And oftentimes when people are first connecting to feeling anything interoceptively, it comes with big, intense waves, right? You can't feel the great stuff without being open to feeling. And if you are holding on to a lot of negative feelings become dangerous and overwhelming. And so making it safe for all that wave to come in, and then being allowed to shift within that state, right? Not having it be your identity, especially as you say, if somebody was told that their body was flawed. I was told my body was flawed pretty early on in my life experience. I was surrounded by people who were constantly on diets, constantly saying how grotesque their bodies were, even though I was inheriting a body like theirs. And, at 6'1" and a big burly beast of a woman. But it became an asset to me as a rugby player, as a jitsuka, I was once on a competitive tug of war team. Like, my body has done incredible things, even having a chronic illness, but learning that my body wasn't a liability. And it also wasn't just a vehicle for my intelligence, that it has intelligence all its own, that is a deeper wisdom than whatever mind garbage my brain container is spewing on a given day. And how to weave all of those knowings together as a gift. It is a journey. And I'm so grateful that your clients have you as an asset and an ally on that journey. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful that we have you on this journey, because, and because you're living proof that, someone might say, well, I've been through so much and I've been told all these things, and how do I change this self-talk, and how do I change it? And you're living proof that you can. And this process is a moment by moment process of listening and trusting that what you know inside is worth listening to.
It takes a lot of trust.
Yeah.
And that trust is a leap. I think it speaks to a belief shift underneath. I, somewhere along the line, came to tap into what I call the unfuckwithable part of myself. I believe very strongly that each of us has like a delicious, authentic essence of who we are, and that even if you have been through incredibly difficult circumstances, that unfuckwithable core is there still, and to trust in the journey that it is there and that you can reconnect to it. And the only reason I believe I can reconnect to it is because I've had times that I thought it was gone. When I was 23 years old, I could not walk barefoot at all. I couldn't carry anything in my left arm. My body literally felt like it was falling apart. And I was having a difficult time getting up off the couch one day. And the partner I was with at the time, I had to call them into the room to haul me up off the couch. And I made a joke about, it sucks getting older. They're like, you are 23. What are you talking about? I was like, well, my whole body hurts. Doesn't your whole body hurt? They're like, no, my whole body doesn't hurt. I'm like, wait. Your entire body doesn't hurt all the time. They're like, no. And until that moment in my life, I thought, as long back as I can remember, that everyone's joints just hurt all the time. And it turns out I have a genetic condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I was told by the first physical therapist I saw after my diagnosis that I essentially was not going to get better, that it was progressive, that I needed to, and I quote, prepare myself for a sedentary life. And then they listed for me all the things I would never be able to do. I fired them very quickly and went back to my diagnosing physician and said, we have a problem. I can't afford an out-of-network physical therapist. I was putting my partner through grad school at the time. I can't afford anyone else. That person doesn't believe in me, and I refuse to let this happen to me. So I will break myself trying, or you can help me. And fortunately, he helped me. But it took about 5 years of trial and error. This was before you could Google it, before there were online resources. And that's what led me into fitness, was the desire to help other people with chronic illness to figure out how to live with a body that worked differently than we had been taught to expect. And now that I've been doing this for 13 years, I'm like, all right, there's a lot of ways that this shows up for most people at this point in some way or another. But that point in my life, I really thought who I thought of as myself was over. And 5 years in, I ran a 5K. Now, being a trainer, being in fitness, being in well-being, I think it's hard for people to understand. So I really want to paint this picture of, I was 23 at time of diagnosis. I chain smoked about a third of a pack a day. I was sewing professionally at the time. I was working as an actor and a costume technician, and about noon every day, my hands would go numb because I was experiencing something called thoracic outlet syndrome. And I didn't know these words. I didn't know any anatomy. I knew how to stand on stage and make pretty sounds with my mouth. I was drinking probably 4 nights a week, severe binge drinking, severe mental health problems, trigger warning, but some suicidal ideation after diagnosis, which at the time, the type of EDS I had, I have the non-lethal type. So the biggest killer of people with hypermobility EDS at the time was suicide, because the chronic pain and the lack of understanding, the lack of resources, people just give up. And so I was not in a good way at 23. So running a 5K at 27 was a miracle. And when I crossed the finish line, last in my age group, slow as hell, I just started sobbing, uncontrollable sobbing. And I think now, looking back, there was all the things that I wasn't feeling in the fear that my life was over, and the accomplishment proving to myself of who I could be again. And then another 18 months later, I ran my first triathlon. I did a sprint distance try. And again, just this wave of, oh, there you are, person that I thought was gone. And that was the unfuckwithable part. And when you find them, you know that is it. Like, that's me at my essence. Yeah. And no one can take that away. But it does take work to find them if you don't know them already. And I also think that for the people who know that person, you take it for granted until someone takes it away. And so I think it's hard sometimes for practitioners who haven't had those kinds of experiences to communicate across the divide to the people who've never been there. What it's like, and also how to get here.
Yeah.
So that was a lot.
No, that was great. It's so true. And I think Yeah, I'm just going to let that sit because
Okay.
there's just, I think that I just, through adversity and being willing to find the way to stay with that part of you that is you through adversity and not distract from it or not gloss it over with positivity or not find some way to distract, um, is what it means to be well, right? And what it means well-being and what it means. There's a depth. I always think of well as a
Mm.
well, a water well. It's deep. You have to go deep to be well. Well is not a surface thing. It's not like, oh, I'm well, everything's good. It's deep, and it's saying, I'm still okay, even though stuff is happening. I'm still okay. Even when there's this painful event in my life or I'm experiencing pain, I'm still okay. And every scoop that we take of the earth of ourselves, right? And every time we say, no, I'm going to dig a little deeper rather than cover it over, is how we find well-being. And that story just shows that so emphatically. And sometimes it does take pain, physical, emotional pain, to say, no, nope, not going there. I'm done. I'm going someplace else. Just like you did with your doctor, saying, all right, this is the moment. I'm not giving into this. That's beautiful. And those people that you talked about in the beginning of positive psychology, that spewed positive psychology, those people who were the ones who didn't give up when there was a problem, and studying them gave us a pathway to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Studying the resilient ones.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, good.
So I feel like I could talk all day to you, but I do want to kind of take a step back and take a big picture look at, what is kind of, what else would you want to add to this conversation, or what do you want to, how would you sum it up in a way that maybe gives someone a direction, someone who's listening to this, to say, all right, I want that. How do I get there? What would be the first step? What do I do now?
Yeah, I think to launch that thread, I want to revisit something that you just said about pain and attunement. And I don't think at all that this is your framing, but if anyone heard it and thinks otherwise, I want to say, like, if there are moments that we need to detach or tune out, um, I lost my grandfather a few years ago, right in the middle of that transition that I was moving home, and I thought I'd have so much more time, and he actually passed just as I was moving home. And I laid in bed for a few days and just binge watched The Simpsons on my laptop. And yeah, such a weird, the weirdest comfort TV has shown up for me in the last few years. I had the flu over the weekend and I watched the X-Files for like 3 days straight. It was great. I kept texting friends like, Mulder and Scully are my nurses. But so I spent these couple of days watching The Simpsons on my laptop, lying in bed, and could kind of metacognition observe myself tuning out, right? I was dissociating via a screen, but I needed to, because the weight of what was happening to my world and to the thing I thought I was going to get and the thing I wanted was bigger than I could think of. And so often now I find that wellness circles, when they talk about this, lack the nuance of saying there is no shame. Like the reason that we have the dorsal vagal switch, we have that emergency off switch when we are overwhelmed to the point that we don't have the capacity to metabolize in all of the different ways that we metabolize the overwhelming experiences of a human life. And so I just want to throw that out there, that if, like, the things we're talking about, the depth and the breadth and the work, if you're like, I just don't have energy for this, that's fine. You cannot have energy. But to answer your question about like first steps, if you don't have the energy for it right now, then the investment is in building your vitality and building your fortitude, in moving your body and eating well and digging deep on your sleep. Like, I start everyone with, how are you sleeping? And if you're not sleeping because of lifestyle behavior, let's start adjusting the systems, because I think all like lifestyles are systems. Let's start adjusting the systems of your life. And if you're not sleeping well because of an overstimulated, dysregulated nervous system, let's start teaching you the skills of soothing, of calming the body, of dropping in, of breathing, to get you to the place that you can actually rest. And so often people want to start with, I want to change how my body works, so I'm going to push myself. Right. Well, if you're already ground to a fine paste, how are we going to grind you any further without you going to dust? So starting with building up that fortitude, building up your resilience, building up the capacity for change by starting with healing yourself, like literally, physically. Are you sleeping? Are you eating nourishing foods? Are you getting the foundational nutrients to be well? And then going into some of these deeper work of opening up emotionally. Obviously, mindfulness is a huge component of that, whether we talk about building it through meditative practice or journaling or mindful movement, mindful eating, and to disambiguate those words, mindfulness being your ability to just observe your own experience in the moment you are in. And so often, so many of us are ruminating on the things that have happened or having anxious ideation about the things that might happen, pulling us forward and back away from the experience of being right now, right where you are. And learning so much of this is just skills. I think that's the other big thing to put out there for people is, the fear that we can't do it, or it's not who I am, we're not trying to take you away from who you are. And you may have picked up, I'm a pretty rough and ready gal. There is no great felt wide brim hat in my wardrobe. Because I think that these are human being skills. We don't have to let go of our authenticity and our alignment to be well. It doesn't have to be something woo-woo. It is just an experience of being fully yourself and being open to learning who that person is.
I'm so glad
it's like at least 5 steps.
Well, like what you said, I want to pull that out because it is, you can only start here where you are. And if you're feeling shame or guilt or a big should in what you're doing or thinking of doing, that is a huge red flag that we're going in the wrong direction. So it sounds like, meeting yourself where you are, but trusting that inner knowing that, I need to veg out for the weekend and watch TV because that's what I need to do right now. And I'm doing that because that's what feels most nourishing right now. Is what I have the bandwidth for. And still observing. I like how you said you were doing that, but still observing it. So there was still this awareness that it was intentional. It was an intentional checking out. And that is, like you said, a really important skill. So no guilt about that. Giving yourself permission to check out, but still staying aware of yourself, not losing yourself, even when you're checking out, to stay that this is intentional. I'm doing this for myself. Yeah. So that mindfulness is that presence is that first step, that real, just being honest with yourself. It sounds like you're saying of where you are right now.
And I think the self-care piece, the way we frame the self-care piece can be so important. So often right now, self-care is things we pay for, right? And that is 100% the byproduct of influencer culture. If you look at the Google Trends data in 2018, hashtag self-care exploded. And that's where we saw this big cultural shift. And before that, self-care was primarily used as a term in the chronic illness space. That's how I came to it. And in the social justice space, right? It's kind of like radicalizing self-care. But with it being co-opted by the influencer space was the monetization of what before that was just like going to bed and eating and moving your body. And I always use the lens of think about how you take care of a dog or a baby. You make sure it eats, you make sure it poops, you make sure it sleeps, you take it for a walk.
And you give it for a little pat. Yeah.
Yeah. You give a little pat when it needs to burp or it's doing a good job. That's it. And we want to make it so complicated, but at the end of the day, as adults, we are giant toddlers. We just have a fully developed prefrontal cortex that keeps us from crying when we're frustrated and hungry. But the underlying mechanisms are still there.
Yeah.
And I think when we put it through the lens of whether I'm moving or I'm resting, whether I'm indulging or I'm eating a particular nutritional protocol, what would be the caring, loving thing? And can I apply that model to myself? Right? Like how would the people, when you think of the people that love you the most, how would they want you cared for if they were in charge? That has been one of the most powerful framings that I can offer. For me, my grandma Betty was my like Mr. Rogers special person, loved me unconditionally as a child. Aww. And when I was at my worst in my self-abuse, that insight of this is not how Grandma Betty would want me taking care of myself. I've outrun my tongue there, but I do think that an opportunity to see the difference in, am I detaching because I can't stand myself, or am I resting because I need to recharge? Am I indulging because I don't know another way to soothe, or am I having something that I can savor as a pleasurable experience? Like, these are very different framings on what it means to be a person, and very different skills of nuance and introspection and genuine deep care. Yeah.
Genuine deep care. That is, I'm going to leave that with everybody listening to just what jumped out at you in this episode as genuine deep self-care right now. And it's not eating healthy, it's nourishing, it's not exercising, it's just, helping you to feel and function better. And that's individual. And thank you, Darlene. This is like, I think there's so much here. I can't wait to re-listen to this, make my own notes. So much wisdom. And this is what coaching does, right? This is coaching helps us listen to ourselves, and Darlene does coaching and so much more. So please check out her website and all of her posts and everything. And I just saw that you posted that you're doing something in 2025. Would you like to share about that?
Yeah. Something that is scaring me to talk about, but today's the first day I rolled it out to public facing. In 2025, I'm starting a new digital community called the Wellbeing Revolution. I think that our next leap forward as a species comes at the time that we prioritize well-being as a radical revolutionary act that every human being should have the right to, but that work starts within ourselves. And I also am framing it as, it's no secret to anyone who's paying attention, the world is in like a scary transitional moment. We have huge challenges ahead of us as a species and as individuals. And we know that when we experience states of well-being, that we are better problem solvers, we're better collaborators and communicators, we are more creative, we're more intuitive, and more generative. And so if we're going to actually solve some of these big, scary problems, we're going to do it better, more effectively, more successfully if we are well. And so I am very lucky to have collaborators and clients, friends, fans of the show who are brilliant, beautiful people who desperately want to build lifestyles based in well-being. And I think we all know we're more effective when we do it together. And so in 2025, I'm launching this community, the Wellbeing Revolution. For now, there's it launches January 3rd. For right now, you can sign up, you can join the community, you can introduce yourself, start connecting with people. On January 3rd, we're going to be doing a live kickoff event, some well-being exercises and ideation, some connection. And then over the course of the year, I'll be rolling out coursework in well-being in lots of different lifestyle domains. And hopefully also we'll be doing some live events, some retreats. So there's a lot coming in this kind of big thing. Yeah, today was the day. You just happened to catch it today. I was rolling out to public.
Just saw it on LinkedIn. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad. I can't wait to learn more about that. Thank you for doing that. Honestly,
I hope you'll join us.
We need these revolutionary kind of things. We need these movements. So thank you for doing that. And I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
Darlene, thank you. Would you like to just remind everybody where to find you? Oh, and I'll put it in the
Absolutely.
show notes.
Well, the community, Wellbeing
Yeah,
Revolution. My
yes.
podcast is called Better Than Fine. And then I'm on Instagram. It's darlene.coach.
Excellent. Thank you, Darlene, so much. Happy holidays. Enjoy your big
Thank you.
celebration. I cannot
Thank
wait
you.
to hear about it. And I look forward to connecting with you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.